I'm a modeler guy. I've been using the quad Cortex for a couple years now, and I recently got a Line 6 Helix. But after attending NAMM last week, I got the itch to try out my pedals and amp again to see if I was missing out. After all, my favorite tone from the show actually came from the Walrus audio booth using all of their pedals. So let's break out my pedal board and amp for the first time in what feels like years and see what I left behind. I was actually pretty excited to be breaking out the Immix 11 again, even if that meant a more complicated setup, because some of this stuff hasn't been used in a long time. I forgot what this is called. I'm breaking out the torpedo captor for this one, not because it's necessary, but trying to be cognizant of my neighbors. This is a nifty little tool. It was finally time for the moment of truth. How does it actually sound? I think it sounds perfect, and oh my gosh, it's so like live, for lack of a better word. I might want it to distort just a little more, but it's pretty spot on for my liking. It's never quite perfect, but it's always very close. I'm gonna go with that, and I'm gonna see how much of that sound I can keep with the mic placement. Adding a mic definitely changes how this all happens, so we'll see if I can get that magic tone in the control room. My bedroom. Wait, I'm in my bedroom. In the office. Okay, here we go. It's been so long since I used this pedal board, I'm not sure it's gonna work correctly, so I'm gonna kind of dial it in. I know it's definitely not dialed into my amp because I haven't used it with my amp in so long, but we'll see if this still works. You've seen all these pedals on my board, maybe you haven't, but I think you've probably seen them all, they're fairly common. I'm just gonna go through each of my gain stages so you can kind of hear what we're working with, and then I'll start doing different combinations. I'm gonna start with just the amp sound so you can see what the foundation is. This is just the Immix 11 in mono. Here's the same thing, just with the compressor. It's just a little bit warmer, maybe a little bit tighter on the dynamics. I'm just using it basically to round out my sound. Here's the bender. Pretty ratty. Very rock and roll. When I use my drives, I pretty much leave my compressor on the whole time because it is so light. Now, when I use my fuzz, I do take it off, but henceforward, everything will have compression on. Here's the Belle Starr. It's kind of like that perfect edge of breakup sound, because if I really like, it's definitely one of my favorite pedals. Next up on this magical tone journey is the JHS Moonshine. I tried it out really quickly earlier, and I must have been really into distortion because this was just so much more gain than what I play with now. But it gets so sludgy in a cool way. Here we go. And those are my three gain pedals. Now I'm gonna stack the two overdrives together, and that's sort of like my third overdrive sound. I think that's a really cool sound, but if I'm being 100% honest, I wish I had like one more step above this. This is where, oh my gosh, you guys are gonna hate me for this, but this is where I kind of miss my modeler. Team tube amp all the way! Because I could essentially make a scene with the same pedal in a new position. Not super practical to do that live here, but I mean, I don't know, maybe I could be like... I think I'd have to practice that more, but maybe it's doable. Now that you've heard the foundation, let's start combining some of these pedals to get some cool tones. This is what I would consider to be like a classic Justin Muncie tone. This is the Cloud on basically it is the Cloud setting, the preset, with the Strymon timeline, a really modulated tape delay sound, and then the Belle Starr and the Walrus audio. Sounds like a 80s modulated ocean in here. This is a little closer to how I run my stuff. The delay is a little louder, but the verb is dialed back, and then I have a stacked overdrive going here. This is probably my most rock and roll sound. I've got the bender fuzz going into the Belle Starr. This one's pretty cool. I've got the Mobius, the timeline, and the big sky. I've got the Belle Starr, compression, and it's like a total 80s vibe. I don't really use a rotary much, but this is pretty fun. Back when I was using my pedalboard and amp, I didn't really do a lot of 80s tones, but now I'm like super into it for some reason, and I think that's maybe one of the best things that this board does. Now that we've heard the pedals and amps, I'm just gonna give you some of my thoughts I had while playing and listening back to the audio. I think the tone on digital modelers and tube amps is honestly pretty identical now, but the feel is different, and the feel affects how I attack it, and how I attack it in turn affects how I sound. So I think that slight tonal difference is more in part to do with the feel of playing on a tube amp versus the actual tone. I'd say amps are just more lively and almost like a little more bouncy. I just feel so much more hyped. Now, I get mega imposter syndrome when I play guitar sometimes, and in this instance, I found myself playing a little more timid on the real amp than how I play when I'm using a modeler. I don't know what it is, but I feel kind of nervous. Like, I have nervous energy. I think it's because I'm just so used to playing with basically no volume that it was a little weird for me to hear myself playing back really, really loud. Like, it made me get in my head a little bit, even though I'm at home with no one listening to me. Drive pedals in an amp are definitely a magical pairing. There's just something like really bright, rich, and full about it. I don't doubt that you couldn't get these kind of tones out of your modeler. You would just have to play with it and fine tune it. But there's something to be said for the simplicity of just plugging a pedal into an amp and it just sounding good right out of the gate. That's not always the case, but it was today. I just fine tuned them and these tones were awesome. When it comes to wet effects, the Mobius, Timeline, and Big Sky are top notch. I'm not saying anything new there, but what I did notice is that my settings in these pedals is much wetter than I run them on my modeling rigs. That's just so much reverb. Now, is that because these pedals sound better or because my style and taste have changed? It's probably a little bit of both. The biggest change that I didn't really feel when I was recording, but I did notice when I listened back, was that this is a mono setup and everything in the digital world feels like it's a big stereo setup, right? We've always got 2 amps or an amp with 2 speakers. I've got stereo amps. The delays and reverbs are pushing the edge of our speakers. It's that big wide image, and this is a old school mono setup. It's not super wide. I don't think it sounded bad. I think it sounds really good. It's just, I'm not used to it in the same way that when I first started playing with these big stereo images, I wasn't quite used to it yet. Obviously, I could add in a second amp and we could have that big stereo effect, but I'm not set up to easily accommodate that right now, so that's something we'll have to try out down the line. This may upset a group of you, but I'm just gonna tell you what I think. Do amps and pedals sound better than modelers? Yeah, I think they do, but is the difference great enough to really matter? I don't know. I don't think it's really that big of a difference, to be honest with you, but to your ears it might be a huge difference, so by all means, go with that. Now, don't get me wrong, I definitely had more fun dialing in the knobs and pressing the buttons than I do menu diving, but I just don't see myself doing this on the reg. I've rarely been in situations in the last 4 years where I've been able to run an amp live, and even if I could, I'm not sure I would. The hassle of bringing all this stuff and transporting it, plus running the risk of, increased risk of cable failures with all these different patch cables, and then banking on my amp tone translating in different rooms night after night with mic placements, different mics, cables, and all that. Like, that's just a lot of variables for something that's probably gonna sound about the same in the mix at the end of the day. It's not a never thing, it's just probably like a special occasions kind of thing. Moral of the story, amps, pedals, and modelers all sound great. Now I'm gonna have to do a deep dive with my Helix to see how close I can get the tones in there to the tones we recorded today. If you enjoyed the video today, be sure to leave a like on it and subscribe to the channel if you're new, and let me know what you think on the whole modeler versus tube amp debate. Where have you landed? What are you using? If you're interested, I have links to the gear, or at least some of the gear we talked about today, in the description. They are affiliate links. Otherwise, I'll catch you next time.